Ladies and gentlemen, if we can close the door, please. Thank you. So, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to this session. Thank you in particular because outside the sun is shining and nevertheless you chose this windowless room, so thank you very much. My name is Christoph Kautz. I work for the European Commission in the Directorate General for Industry, and in particular I work on satellite navigation, the European satellite navigation system Galileo, and you might say, oh, what is this guy doing here with regard to update on AML, but you will understand this in a minute. So we have quite a full agenda with several speakers, which I'll introduce one after the other when they will start their speech. I've got quite an interesting session. We will have a presentation first from Benoît giving an update on AML in Europe. Then we will have a presentation and a video from Google, and then we go overseas to New Zealand to learn there about how they have implemented AML, and then we go back to Europe to hear about AML in Norway, and then we will have a presentation by PSAP, in fact Scotland. And then I will close the session with some concluding remarks, and then you are free for the evening. Without further ado, Benoît, I don't think I need to introduce you. Everybody knows you here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Christoph. Thank you, everyone. And I was about to say thank you, EENA, for the invitation, but I prepared the program for this session, so thank you myself. I'll be very quick because you've seen me enough probably already, but I just want to give some kind of latest updates on AML and what happened in the past 12 months since we've seen in Ljubljana. So that was the map that I was showing in Ljubljana. That is where we were with AML deployment, so in a few countries in Europe, plus 2 outside of Europe, in New Zealand and in the Emirates. And in the past 12 months, AML has been deployed in some more countries. It has been deployed, first of all, outside of Europe, in the United States. Still not all the PSAPs, but most of them are now covered. And in 3 more countries in Europe, it has been deployed in Norway. We'll hear about that in a few minutes. It has been deployed in Moldova and in the Netherlands a few weeks ago. So there has been a few more additions to the list of countries having deployed AML, but for the other countries, it's not like nothing had happened, because that is probably where we will be next year when we will see again in Riga. So most of Europe will be covered. Namely, I know that France, Germany, Portugal, Croatia, Hungary, Sweden and Denmark are working in the context of the Help 112 project with the European Commission to deploy AML in those countries, plus some other countries of the European Union also working on it. I'd like just to ask you, actually, from the audience, do you see that maybe your country should be in green next year, or do you want to suggest something? No? Quite accurate? Okay. And another update or something that happened in the past 12 years, I don't know if you remember, but 1 year ago we were presenting something that was kind of new and that would arrive to the PSAPs, is AML for text to 112. So you know when in many countries, the population and mainly the deaf and hard of hearing citizens, but sometimes all the population, have the possibility to send an SMS to the emergency services. It's what we call text to 112, but it can be text to 999, for instance, or equivalent in all the countries. And in many countries now there's a possibility to send an AML position for this. So after you send an SMS saying I have an emergency and so on, something like 20 seconds after, there's another SMS that is sent with the accurate location information. And this is available in those countries, in Norway, Finland, Lithuania, Moldova, Belgium, the United Kingdom, and Iceland, plus outside of Europe also in the 3 other countries. So this is a possibility that now exists just with ELS and Google so far, but maybe it will be extended soon to other OS providers. Then in terms of other updates, at EENA we've also been very active in promoting AML in many countries. There has been also the European Electronic Communications Code, and that's kind of a teaser for my presentation tomorrow about the European legislation, but basically AML will have to be deployed in all the countries of the EU by December 2020, so end of next year. That's a big advance, of course. Something else that was done over the past months was the launch of the Help 1122 project, which I have just described about like deploying AML in 7 countries of the European Union. And there's still some work around the standardization of AML that is ongoing at ETSI, so the European Telecommunications Standards Institute. And yeah, still for the inactivities, so we'll publish in the next weeks a document called the AML report card that, well, you're probably already familiar with the document we have, like the PSAP's global report that we publish every year at the end of the year. There will also be something really about AML and how it is deployed in each country, and that will give you like all the information about how it works, how it's deployed, and so on. We have a conformance program also that is ongoing to make sure that AML is operationally working in all the PSAPs, and that's it for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benoît. I will use the occasion, as I have got the microphone, to say perhaps some words about what we are doing here and why satellite navigation comes into this. So we had funded a project called Help 112, and now we are funding a second project called Help 1122, as Benoît just mentioned, which is basically helping PSAPs to roll out AML, and an AML that on the handset side will work also with satellite navigation, because in the first Help 112 project we figured out that the best location you can get it through satellites. And since then we are very much involved in this, and we are very happy to be able to support the rollout of AML in PSAPs. And on the handset side, we also have worked on the legislative framework, and you will hear more about this tomorrow, whereby basically we have ensured that handset manufacturers have to make location-based information that comes from satellites and Wi-Fi obligatory. So your phone needs to be able to do this.
I'm Fiona. I'm from Google, and my colleague Soonil and I are here to give you an update on what's happened with ELS since the last time we were here at the EENA conference in 2018. So to start, we are launched in more countries, 18 countries in total, covering 600+ million people, managing 1.3 million emergency calls a day. Now, we deploy ELS in a country by partnering with either a government entity, usually, the part of the government that is responsible for emergency services, or we partner with MNOs, or with a public safety infrastructure vendor. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. Now, I realize that some of you may be new to ELS, and some of you may need a refresher course, so I'm going to just do a quick overview of ELS in the next few slides. So bear with me, those of you who are familiar. Okay, so what is ELS? It is a supplemental service that quickly sends enhanced location from an Android handset to emergency services when the user calls 112. This can be either a voice call or a text to 112. What's really nice about ELS is that it is a seamless global solution. As the video says, it's supported in 99% of Android phones today, as long as that phone has Google Play services on it and runs on Android 4.0 and up. Now, our current Android operating system is Android 9.0, so you can see that ELS is backward compatible with Android devices from 5-6 years ago. The other nice thing about ELS is it just works. It's not an app. It doesn't require any special hardware or software. User doesn't need to do anything. And at the same time, once it's activated in a country, any Android device that is eligible for ELS will get regular over-the-air updates. These are very lightweight. It means you get the latest features pretty quickly. Somebody once said that the handset knows best where the handset is. Now, we designed ELS around this entire concept. Location is calculated on the device whenever somebody contacts emergency services. We detect that they're making a call. We compute location using, location signals we get from cell, GPS, GNSS, crowdsourced Wi-Fi sensors, and then we apply some Google algorithmic magic on top of that, and then we send the computed location off to an ELS endpoint. And I'll cover what an ELS endpoint is in my next slide, right? The other thing about ELS is it only activates when somebody contacts an emergency number, one that we have configured with the partner. There is no other way to trigger ELS. And then finally, and a lot of people find it hard to believe, but we make ELS free. It doesn't cost anything. We make it free to our partners with the hope that they make it free to public safety. Our goal is basically to keep Android users safe everywhere around the world. So this graphic kind of depicts how ELS location data goes from an Android device when the user contacts an emergency number until it reaches the PSAP. The important part of this component of this diagram is the ELS endpoint. That's why we made it bigger than everything else. First, I want to stress that the ELS endpoint is set up and maintained by our ELS partner, and I talked about the 3 types of partners that we have. What's an ELS endpoint? It is the thing that is responsible for receiving ELS location data messages from the device during an emergency, and it is responsible for then making that ELS location data message available to public safety. Now, the endpoint can do that either by pushing the location data message to the appropriate PSAP or by allowing PSAPs, by giving them secure credentialed access, by allowing them to come into the endpoint and get the message that applies to them. Now, when setting up an endpoint, we give partners a couple of choices as to how they want to receive the ELS location message. You can choose to receive the ELS location message as a data SMS message. That is basically plain text. It's a subset of plain text SMS. If the partner chooses to do that, then they have to set up an SMSC as the endpoint. The benefit of data SMS is the user doesn't need to have a mobile data plan or any kind of mobile data in order for ELS to send the location message. We have found data SMS to be more reliable in most countries, but the negative of data SMS is it may require more work to set up the SMSC. The partner may have to work with MNOs to kind of troubleshoot issues. The other option we offer partners is you can choose to receive your ELS location data message as an HTTPS message, which means that your endpoint then just has to be an HTTPS server that can receive HTTPS post messages. This is a lot easier to set up. Most people know how to set up an HTTPS server, and you can actually put more information into the ELS location message. Like we currently output z-axis, otherwise known as altitude, in our HTTPS ELS messages. The downside of HTTPS is it does require that the phone have mobile data in order to work, and in some countries we have seen higher failure rates for a variety of reasons that I am happy to talk to anybody about offline. So, this is how it works. Somebody dials an emergency number. In this case, it's 911. The device detects that 911 emergency number is being dialed. ELS computes location using those sources, location sources that I mentioned earlier, then sends that location to the endpoint, either as a data SMS or an HTTPS message. And from that point, Google loses visibility into what happens to that ELS location data message. It is the partner's responsibility to make that location information available to the PSAP. And then we rely on partners to tell us, okay, it went, it didn't go. Now, having said all this, I will say that many partners choose to have one HTTPS endpoint, and a data SMS endpoint. So you can have both endpoints up, but we strongly encourage, in fact, we almost require that each country only have one endpoint and one partner, unless there are really outstanding extenuating circumstances. So what makes ELS different? There's no PII, no personally identifiable information stored by Google. As I mentioned, ELS only activates when the user contacts 112, the location is computed on the device and sent off to the endpoint. Nothing is stored on Google services. We use data SMS and HTTPS. They're standard technologies, and they're very easy to integrate with emergency services infrastructure. ELS is robust, so we always send location with an accuracy circle, and we can compute location for the duration of the emergency call. Finally, we designed it to be very configurable, right? There are multiple configuration options that we let partners pick. You can tell us what emergency numbers you want ELS to activate for. We can support multiple numbers, short numbers, long numbers. You tell us how frequently you want ELS location reported. You can say, I want it sent the first time you get a fix, 25 seconds into the call, and then another 10 seconds later. We do that. You can tell us what the minimum battery life is before we stop sending location, so we can preserve battery life for the user to communicate with emergency services. There are other options, but I just wanted to hit the high ones. Now, my colleague Soonil is going to talk about new features since the last time we were here.
Thank you. I'll be running through these pretty quickly, but yeah, let's go over a couple of the new things. So one of the cooler new things we've introduced is the user opt-out feature. If you go into any Android phone that supports ELS right now and you go into the location settings, you'll find a new setting right there for the emergency location service, and that allows any user to completely opt out their device from ELS. I mean, obviously we hope they don't do that, but they have the freedom to do so if they so desire, and that will be completely respected. This is supported on every Android device that supports ELS at the moment. As Benoît mentioned earlier, since earlier in 2018, we have supported text to 112 or text to 911 so that we can send locations when the user texts 911 or 112 in addition to if they were to call it. This is currently activated in 5 countries in Europe, 7 countries globally, and we hope that more countries are going to be adopting this in the near future. With regards to our ELS Manager app, this is a separate app that we make available to partners to help them test ELS. This app is only for the purpose of testing ELS. It is not something the user requires. We have added functionality to this app to allow it to make it easier to test with data SMS. You can now use the app to display data SMS that are sent to that phone so that you can more easily test with this app and make sure that all your systems and endpoints are working correctly before we go to a full production deployment. Finally, we've talked about this in previous years as well. Z-axis is something Google is working hard on. The Z-axis elevation is important, especially in urban areas. You know, you get X, Y, but how do you know, if the user's in a big apartment building exactly where they are? We now support Z-axis in terms of the WGS84 ellipsoid. That is, you can think of that as the same model of the Earth that GPS and GNSS satellites use. So that is currently supported, currently available. If you're getting ELS messages, you can get the elevation. That's not just available through ELS, that is available to any application that gets location on an Android phone, whether that's Maps or Uber and Lyft, those kind of apps. It's available to any application. Finally, just a cool little picture. This is the satellite view of the conference center we're currently in. We took this earlier yesterday, and you can see the location right there is pretty much exactly where we are right now. That little rectangular field right there is the surface of the roof above us as seen from space. All right, and those are all the new features I'm going to cover. Of course, if you guys are interested in ELS, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact us, to look at our website right there, and to contact us at the listed email. Thank you.
So thank you very much, and you have all the details there if you want to contact Google. I'm now very happy to introduce Ben Quay, who probably came from the farthest location from New Zealand, and he's Program Director in the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. The floor is yours.
Cool, thank you. Hello everyone, Ben Quay from New Zealand. I'm the Program Director for Emergency Caller Location Information Service, or ECLI, in New Zealand. I'm responsible really for delivery, the enhancement and the ongoing operations of New Zealand Government's location services. In addition, I also do the telecommunication relay service, which is providing telecommunication services for people with speech, hearing, deaf impairments and the like. So, some of these slides I did go through yesterday, so if you were at my presentation yesterday, sorry, but I'll just go through these for those that weren't. We've kind of gone on a journey, I guess, with location for us. We've kind of taken a staged approach to everything. We started our journey in 2015 with Cabinet in New Zealand approving some funding. And we were looking at doing a smartphone downloadable app, and that was going to have like two-way communication between the emergency services and the users or the people in distress. And we looked at that and we were thinking, well, actually, there's maybe some better ways of doing this. Actually, instead of having everybody download an app, actually, couldn't we do something better? And thankfully, I came to EENA conference in 2016, and Google at that point announced that they were going to be importing AML into Android as ELS. So that was enough for me to go back to New Zealand government and change the scope of the project, change what we were doing, change the outcome, change pretty much everything about the project, and ditch the idea of an app and come up with a different way of doing it, which really led us to phase 1 launch in 2017, which was with AML or ELS on the Android phones. And we also built a network cell-based solution, which provides like a coarser, broader area of location probability that the caller's there. And at that point, it was kind of like, well, there's a lot more we can do. We've still got Apple phones. You know, we've got about 35% of the phones in New Zealand are Apple. So we need a solution for that. But then there's also other things that we could do. And we're looking at data. How do we kind of improve the location capabilities? And a lot of things along those lines. So quickly run through. So we extended the service in 2018 with iOS going live. And we also introduced the 111 text, which is the ELS or SMS to ELS that they were just talking about just now. And we also got approval to start our phase 2. I'll talk a little bit more about phase 2 and some following on slides, but essentially what we've done is we've introduced 3GPP location services, which interact with the mobile phones via the control plane. And that then allows us to increase the yield of location capabilities as well. So that went live with two of our 3G networks in October of last year. We're working on our third mobile network at the moment, and we're also working on 4G voice over LTE, so VoLTE introduction as well. That should hopefully be live July-ish, subject to various issues. And then later on, we'll be looking at voice over Wi-Fi, looking at location for emergency calls where there is not a 111 call, so not an emergency call active. And then also AML version 2, when that comes out as well, we'll be looking to introduce that and get other capabilities off the phone. So journey kind of continues. It will go on. If I can get this to go on as well, maybe. There we go. So I thought, interesting, you know, one of the things that everyone talks about is privacy, and I think GDPR is one of those things that's coming here into Europe. We changed the law. I mean, that sounds pretty straightforward. It kind of was to some extent. It took us about 3 or 4 months to do public consultation, working with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, working through exactly how we'd actually manage individual PII data. One of the key things that we were able to do was say, actually, somebody's right to privacy. Is it right that that can be withheld in times of emergency situation? There are regulations within the EU that I'm not sure too much on the GDPR at the moment, but we kind of modelled some of those, some of the capabilities or the legislation aspects of it into our regulations. And so essentially there's kind of 4 parts to it. It's an amendment to our existing Telecommunications Information Privacy Code. You can see it was written in 2003, so it's really up to date and modern. And so we amended that with an amendment number 5 in 2017. And the key thing about this is that it allows us to basically collect location off of a device when it's actually been, without somebody's consent, but ensuring that somebody has actually dialed 111. So just going back to my previous slide where we're talking about collecting location where there isn't an emergency call, that requires us to really look at what our privacy regulations are at the moment, because obviously that would be outside of the bounds of that. We hold the personal data for about 60 minutes and then we delete it. We retain the location information, we obfuscate it and hash that, but we remove things like the cell phone number, the IMEI, the MUSDN, those kind of things that would be identifiable. But we like to keep that information, we keep the actual messaging information so we can actually then look at how we can start to improve our system. Data analytics is really important for this kind of stuff because it helps you improve on what you're doing and the services you're providing to emergency services. So emergency service providers, they retain that address information. They've got a dispatch to a location, so they're authorised now to keep that data. There was a little bit of grey area that we tidied up in the legislation. And also mobile network operators, obviously they've got a big part to play in this. We're taking the data from their subscribers. So what do? Well, me, personally, I own the privacy risk on behalf of the New Zealand government and also on behalf of the network operators. We decided that it was easier and simpler to basically consolidate all privacy risk into one entity. So that's the ministry that I work for, or me as the owner of it. So we carry that risk, but we ensure that we have a lot of processes and practices in place that allow us to measure, audit, log, whatever you want to do around that, we can actually then be basically held to account and ensuring that citizen private data is maintained in private way. Where are we now? So this is when we went live with phase 1. So this is really looking at all the different kind of capabilities and the different types of phones. So this includes our kind of phase 1 that we have with Apple as well. So GNSS and Wi-Fi off the handset. You can see there's a lot of crosses, so other smartphones. I believe there might be some work happening with EENA around mandating other phones. So Microsoft or other who come into the market may end up with having to do AML as well. But also, a lot of crosses down on the other parts of it. So it's good. We thought we could do more. That's what phase 2 wants to do. But I think one of the things that seems to be missing from a lot of the conversations is around stats and AML and what it actually does. And this is just based on what we do in New Zealand. Your country will be different. I don't know if you're collecting the stats. You should be. If you're not, because it helps you measure and it helps you improve and it helps you work out whether your settings are correct for the variety of situations that occur on the mobile networks. So you can see we've got distribution for AML, 52% is Android, 35% come through as iOS, and we've got 15% other. So that's really kind of, that's through the operating systems, that's all of those capabilities, not just AML on that one, by the way. But the location methods that we receive, we get a lot of GNSS, so that's GPS as well. Wi-Fi is very good. And so we're really getting quite a lot of high precision location. And high precision is what you want because high precision allows you to start dispatching when somebody doesn't know where they are. Cell is a good opportunity to refine the location down. It's much broader, but it really allows you to say, well, where is that person? What town are they in? What area, locality? You probably couldn't dispatch to it, but some circumstances might allow it. And of course, there's a failure rate. It's not foolproof. You do get failures. Things happen in the mobile networks. SMS get lost. You and I send each other SMSs. Sometimes they don't go through. Same principle applies. But those are the kind of things you need to be tracking so you can start to look backwards into your system and find out why those things are happening. And then we've got GNSS precision. You can see that Android is it gets a better precision than iOS, but we get higher GNSS yields off of our iOS calls as well. I don't know why. It just is. So, anyway, so what are the percentages? So this was an interesting stat that surprised me actually when we ran the stats again at the end of March. So when we went live in May 2017, we had 26% of the calls were the genuine calls to our 111 service were being supported by location. When we say supported, it's that the call takers were using the location for 26% of the calls they were taking. It's become so dependent now that they're now using it for 69% of those calls, which is, it's now become a priority, critical part of their work. And just on that, last month, St John's Ambulance and Wellington Free Ambulance, we have 2 ambulance services in New Zealand, They have just changed their business processes for call handling, so that instead of going through the fairly laborious process of address verification, of asking for what else can you see, if they get a GPS or basically a match, and it can be GPS or Wi-Fi, they'll basically just move on to the next call. And in some instances, we're seeing call reduction times of over a minute on address verification. So 1 minute on a call where there's somebody having a heart attack, it's quite a lot of time that can be saved. So we'd like to see that 69% go higher. We're not mandating the use. We think it's actually an organic kind of usage, and they see the benefit of better location. But it's really important to, we need to start looking at some of the other stats that we're seeing. I'm not going to go through them all, but a key one is the 40% reduction in unresolved no-speech emergency calls. So these are some of the hardest ones for police. These are the ones that default through where whatever it is, we call it ICAP, which I guess is the PSAP, the initial call answering point. It's where they know somebody's on the phone, they know somebody's in trouble, but they can't communicate. So they put it through to police. We call those NSEC, no speech emergency calls, some of the hardest ones to work out where somebody is. We've had a 40% reduction in those ones, and those ones are there where somebody is in really urgent critical need, but they can't communicate. What happened? People died. Today, we can go find them, which is a really interesting, but really kind of one of those things that brings it home to say, what is the value of location? 30% reduction across all phone calls for police in the last year, pretty good. 45% reduction of ambulance calls, and of course that's just increasing at the moment because of the changes to their business processes as well. The $10 million, that's on structural fire. We've been able to work out the way that fire doubles in size every minute. So we can then contrast that to if you can get the fire truck out to the house or whatever structure is on fire, you can then actually start to work out, well, what is the reduction in fire damage and insurance claims that go with that, and that then becomes a nice useful benefit that you can put into your business case to get your funding to actually then start to achieve this stuff. Because I'm essentially the ELS endpoint. That's not free, that's not provided by Google, you have to do that. But there are ways you can get this funded, and that's kind of stuff that helps you do it. Obviously, yield on the left-hand side, that's going to be country-specific, and you need to look at those things about what your penetration levels are of different phone types, what your geographic regions are like as well. So it's very much variable. What are we doing? Phase 2, location methods. This is what we've got in place today. So you see, this is the previous slide. This is why we thought we could do more. This is where the 3GPP location services that come through the control plane comes in. And basically, we're doubling our capability. So we get location off the handset, and we go and collect location off the handset through the network. So they both work in tandem. It really brings up the opportunity because you've got timers set on the handset, which are configured and fixed. We allow our call takers now to go and collect and request a location during the in-call. So that allows them to do multiple things. One that you might not be familiar with is enhanced cell ID. This is essentially measuring the time it takes for the signal to get from the cell tower to the phone and back, round-trip timing, and because we then know what the parameters are of this particular cell tower, we can then refine that down and put a banding and work out where that person is. And that's available for feature phones as well, so non-smart phones. So it brings a whole lot more capability through, which is great. And what does it mean? Hopefully that's the next slide. Maybe not. Advanced mobile location. Yeah, so we've got it activated, I said May 2017 for Android, iOS in 2018. And of course, we're doing the control plane solution at the moment, and there was a session on that earlier today as well. So what does all that mean? Why are we doing it? Because we want to achieve 95% of all of our genuine 111 calls that are from smartphones. We want them to have a high precision location, so that's within 50 meters. And I just got some stats sent through to me from New Zealand earlier today, and we see that 52% of our calls that have got a location have that location within 20 meters. So it's pretty high precision. So I guess the green is that we're now seeing 83% of the calls have a high precision location. We obviously want to get 95 by 2021. The orange line just going through there is the US FCC location targets. So we achieved that, 2 years ahead of them, which is pretty cool. So that's really what we're trying to do. Get the high precision, you can dispatch, you save time, you save lives. These are just these are all the different types of locations that get presented onto the screen for our call takers. It looks a bit busy, but you can see that you've got various different types of location. The banding one was the round trip timing I was talking about, enhanced cell ID. Looks pretty broad, but when you combine it with GPS or other capabilities and you overlay them, and you can see down in the bottom left-hand side, you've got a neighbor cell. The phones know where they are, the network know what's going on. You can overlay that stuff. Overlay it with the GNSS location. You get pretty good location information. And we do this and we just keep getting more and more location coming in for the call takers. We put some algorithms around that to kind of demonstrate how, to show what is the highest confidence level or the highest precision, and they can look at that and filter that and work through. We can also do basically tracking within the call, and we can also show where that person is moving to if they're in transit.
Ben, we are running out of time.
I think 2 slides. This was just a little Easter egg. It's actually a weird one with Easter coming up. It's actually 2 GPS records. There's one coming off the handset, there's one coming out of the network. The 2 overlay, one's AML, one's GNSS. And you can see this is basically just a quick screenshot of what our call takers get. And so, yeah, GPS is all what we want, ideally. The other thing, what we're doing as well, so we're working on the AML rebidding, we're looking at search and rescue support, expanding that out for them. As mentioned, the non-111 location, how do we do that? Optimization of our networks, that's really key. How do you actually start to optimize those networks? Because the better information, the better settings they've got within the network, the more precision you're going to get. Voice over Wi-Fi I mentioned. And key one over here, patient dispatch information, was something that Wellington Free Ambulance asked us to do. And that was to actually be able to send information back out to the caller. So, at the end of the call, people are rattling through what you need to do to get prepared for your ambulance arrival. We now just text them. And then we text them an ETA of the ambulance. And then we can then send them an update if the ambulance has been rerouted. And that was just really kind of building on SMS. It's all kind of basic stuff. This is really why we do it. Not to get in the media, but it's kind of like people get lost. We can find them now. They don't spend the night freezing. Well, they did in this case, but we found them anyway before anything else happened. But these kind of situations, there was a lot of stuff in the media where, in New Zealand, people go out for long walks and they don't get prepared. We find them now. They don't spend the night in the bush. I'll skip through it probably over time. But these are just some of the actual call scripts that we get through. We get information through from our emergency service all the time. And this is the reality of actually why we do it. The ones that go into the media is great, but this is the reality where actually there's a lot of stuff where people are either trying to kill themselves, they're in trouble with family violence, or there's alcohol or some issues going on. And these are real events. Obviously the boxes obfuscate the information, but this is just real-time information that comes in and helps find people who can't communicate at the time. And there we go. That's me.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed. As we're a little bit behind time, I suggest we take questions at the end. So I would like to invite Sven Bruun, who is Senior Advisor at the Department of Emergency Medical Service at the Directorate of Health in Norway. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm Sven from Norway, working with emergency services, primarily on the health side, but also a lot together with police and fire in Norway. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. A story behind it, the deployment challenges, how it's working, how it affects the emergency services, the recommendations, and some, or at least one, success story. Yeah, a little bit about Norway. We have 3 emergency numbers, 112 for police, 110 for fire and rescue, and 113 for ambulance. The call takers in the ambulance control room are mainly nurses, and the dispatchers are usually EMTs. Then we also have 116, 117 for the non-emergency medical stuff. And we also have some projects in Norway where we co-locate some of the control rooms. Police and fire are going to be co-located all over Norway. And for instance, in the city of Bodø, all 3 agencies are co-located in the same floor. Not in the same room, but in the same floor. Yeah, the story behind co-location in Norway. We have been using co-location since 1995, and we had a central hub from 2007. We call it NRDB. And that handles number portability, call information, name and address, and caller location based on the old cell ID system that the previous speaker has said something about. The positioning is available for call takers on every call with no delay. And this hub is owned and financed by the mobile network operators because they are told so by the regulator, the Norwegian Communication Authority, who also regulates how this system is going to work. Yeah, this is, I don't know if you see all the stuff, but this is the architecture that we had until last year. With a call center here, you receive a phone call center asks the hub about the position and other info based on the telephone number. The hub asks the mobile network for subscriber information and for base station information, and then it sends it back to the call center, either ambulance, police, or fire, with this old cell ID stuff. So why did we deploy AML or want to have AML? Because having an accurate position is quite important. And we have focused on this timeline that we use for the medical emergency services. And we think that not all citizens will download an app. And even if they download, our experience is that they don't actually use it every time. And we wanted to reduce the time spent to pinpoint exact address or position. Yeah, so we call it, I don't know if the English word is correct, we call it the place mark time. It's the time the call taker uses to find out where the incident is. And this is the time we want to narrow down. And also, if the ambulance gets a more exact position, we also think that they would use less time to understand where the incident is. And also, when they are going to the scene, they will also use less time, for instance, for the last 100 meters, when they have an exact position of the patient or the incident. So we decided then to use the existing hub that we already had. We had an XML-based API already in place with the field for a GNSS position several years ago. We had the support for our national authorities, and then we started a lot of technical discussions with both Google and Apple, how to receive the AML information, both from the mobile phone to the hub. We decided to use data SMS, and from the hub to the control room, where we use this XML protocol that we have made. So this is how it works today. It's quite a complicated drawing. I don't know if you see it in back. But still, the phone call center has an A number, the number of the caller. It sends a request to this hub. At the same time, hopefully, the phone sends the position via SMS to this hub, the server, and this hub could send the information back to the appropriate call center, both location and subscriber info, both cell ID and a GNSS position. So this is how it works. And as you saw, this is as it was earlier. we just added this new stuff here, SMS support and stuff like that, to the existing hub that we already had. Yeah, we had a lot of dialogue with the mobile network operators, and we saw that we had some legal challenges with Google and the mobile network operators and the Norwegian Data Protection Authority. And also it was told from New Zealand, we had to make changes in the regulations related to emergency calls. The mobile network operators didn't want to support the AML before we did a change in the regulations. And we also had to do enhancements in the GIS system in the call centers to show both base stations and GPS positions. So this is how the current configuration is for Android. As you can see, we send one position after 10 seconds and then another position after 30 seconds. This is the pilot figures. We might change those in the future. This is an example of an actual call. We have decided to always show the base station area together with the AML position to verify that the position is correct. Because there might be circumstances if you are inside a train and call 112, it might use a wrong GPS position and stuff like that. So we show those two positions together. Yeah. The challenge that we had was the intense responsibility, this legislation stuff that I've already talked about. We had to change them. We have to implement this in all the map systems we use in the call centers. And we also need support for all three emergency numbers. Google supports every one of them. We have some issues with Apple. We are testing, have been testing AML in the Apple phone, but only for 112 at the moment. Yeah, this is the current numbering we have for percentage of 112 calls received with AML. We have been on 20-25% for a long time. We don't quite understand why, because Android has like 40 or 50% of the phone market in Norway. Then suddenly, a couple of days ago, it rose to 40%, and I was told this yesterday, so I had to change my slide. And we don't actually know why yet. It's so new to us, so we don't know. Did Google are saying they didn't do nothing? Might be something in the mobile network, might be one of the handset providers that had done some changes. We don't know yet, but it's a good figure because 40 is where we would like to be. Yeah, quick on recommendation. Have a project group with representative from all the agencies, the emergency services, and things like that. Create a shared hub for handling the call location for the whole country and for all the agencies, as also was recommended by Google. Look at the regulations, change them if needed, and cooperate closely with the mobile network operators and the map vendors. Yeah, I think I'll skip this one since I'm out of time. Then the last is a success story. This was an accident in the mountains in the northern part of Norway. It was a tourist, and AML could immediately give them the position with 10 meters of accuracy, and the call taker could focus on the life-saving first aid issues with the caller and not the location, because she knew where this was. We have other stories with cars, people in their cabin, don't know the address, they are distressed, don't even know the color of the house they are staying in. So then AML is a good thing. Yeah, I think that was it from me.
Thank you very much. That was very enlightening also. The challenges you mentioned was very interesting, and your statistical change from 20 to 40%.
Yeah, just for the conference.
Okay, next speaker is Strategic Operations Manager at the National Risk and Resilience Department, Scottish Ambulance Service. Please.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. I'm acutely aware it's the end of the day and we've taken up a lot of your time, so I'll get through this as quickly as possible. So, as per the introduction, Susan here to talk about the AML implementation. For the past 2 years at the Scottish Ambulance Service, held the post of Strategic Operations Manager, previously 13 years at Manchester Emergency Operations Centre for the North West Ambulance Service. The vast majority of my time I've been lucky enough to spend in and around the control rooms, and also been involved in a number of implementation projects during my time in service, one of those being AML. So as we discussed, the AML endpoint was enabled in June 2016 for Android devices and later at April 18 for iPhone. Although the endpoint is enabled in the UK for both of those brands and some others, there's still some services that are yet to make use of AML, and that's primarily around their CAD configuration rather than the availability of AML at the endpoint. Okay, so in Scotland, we see about 65% of calls come from mobile devices. Of these 999 calls, approximately 70% of those come with AML, which is a really high number. The reasons for the ones that don't come with AML, largely down to things like the age of the device, the software on the device, or the manufacturer. So, of course, not all AML-enabled calls are usable. We have to think about things like third and fourth parties, where the caller is requesting help for a different location. But still, that shouldn't put anybody off in terms of emergency services and their adoption of AML. It's a fantastic tool, and we all need to make sure that we're using it as much as we can. So the objective of Scottish Ambulance was to take something like this, which is an actual AML string from the specification, and turn it into something like this, which is obviously responders arriving at scene. I'm not entirely sure why the responders' age decreased about 30 years from leaving the ambulance. So it could be a side effect of AML, but I can't guarantee that. So anybody working in the NHS, particularly ambulance services, will know that control room staff like nothing more than continuity and reliability. If something doesn't work or it tends to be a little bit flaky, then it'll be forgotten about and sent off to the trash can. So whilst availability of AML is increasing in Scotland, we've got to acknowledge that it will never be 100% and that we need to keep in mind things like calls from landlines, and as I said, calls from third and fourth parties. So to smooth the implementation of AML, we identified early on that we need to very closely incorporate AML into existing control room functionality, which is almost the CAD, and ideally make it invisible almost to 999 operators. So in order to interpret that AML string that I showed you a minute ago, it's into a meaningful way, the CAD system needs to be made AML aware. And this is essentially the bottleneck for a number of services in the UK and their adoption rate of AML. So plotting the coordinates on a map, drawing a circle around it is a great first step, but it's important not to stop there and also not to try and do it by yourself. We had lots and lots of help. So at Scottish Ambulance, we use MIS's CAD C3 system. That's in use in 8 out of 14 of the trusts in the UK. So we found that really helpful to have a large, relatively local user base, key to driving the functionality changes at the scale required to support an AML implementation. So shared best practice, user groups, all helped highlight the importance of AML for emergency services, and it helped push the CAD suppliers to implement the functionality in ways that help the users make the most of this location data. Okay, so what AML isn't? So, as we know, it provides a highly accurate location, which is sometimes up to 4,000 times more accurate than cell site triangulation alone. What it doesn't do is provide us with a human-readable address, which is something that's essential for sharing and discussing and relating to the location of the incident in a control room environment. So, just to make sure you're all still awake, we're going to do a quick show of hands. I'd just like to know how many people are going out for a drink or something to eat tonight. Come on, and the rest. Excellent. Okay, so next, another show of hands. Once you've gone out and you need to find your way back to the hotel, how many of you would tell your taxi driver to navigate to 4266027 18062528? Show of hands? Just one. And for all. Cheers, mate. Yeah. Okay, so ideally, none. And that's because we don't converse in lats or longs or grid references, because it's not efficient, it's not easy to relate to, and it's difficult to share. So whilst AML is part of the solution when it comes to location searching, and that word is key, location, the AML data points to a location, but it doesn't generate a text-based human-readable address. So emergency call handlers have long utilized address-based gazetteers to search for this human-readable address, which is linked then to geographical coordinates, which are sent by CAD to the GIS software and onto sat-nav systems to get responders from A to B. So call handlers will search for addresses or maps features, such as motorway marker posts, for example, and the coordinates are sent on to responders by mobile data. So any discussion regarding the location only ever using this human-readable address, such as usual format of house number, street, and town or city. And it's important to remember that every single resource deployment from an emergency service CAD, a 999 operator has searched for, identified an address, so it's a deeply ingrained behavior, and any changes to that, they need to be approached really sensitively. So here we have the address of our national headquarters building in Scotland, along with the various coordinates and addressing systems that relate to the same place, the same point on the map. For a successful AML implementation, we realized that we shouldn't force call handlers to deal with lengthy strings of coordinates, but change the language of locations and how we literally address the geographical location. So one notable new system, if you like, is What 3 Words, which addresses 3 by 3 meter squares across the globe with unique combinations of 3 separate words. It's a simple idea with massive possibilities, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. So this slide shows an AML hit that's accurate enough to identify which side of the road a 999 call was made from. That's incredible. I thought it's important to explore the potential the potential impacts of not using this amazing technology. So let's say the emergency call handler chose to query the address-based gazetteer. And this is an example location given by a caller for a typical road traffic collision. And the gazetteer is going to struggle to identify these specific coordinates. So as you can see on the left of your screen, you've got the location that was plotted by CAD as a result of the address-based gazetteer, and the flag to the right is where the incident scene actually was, where the AML source pointed to. As you can see, it's 2.5 kilometers away. So whilst the sat-nav will direct the responders to the point on the map, and the guys in the ambulance will be able to interpret the readable address that was sent, responders will probably get to scene. But there's a number of factors that we need to consider. Things like automatic on-scene detection, which lets the control room know that a resource has arrived. Things like the ETA and the closest responder calculations. So the dispatchers will use the ETA calculations to judge which resource should be deployed to the incident. So if the call handler hasn't identified the correct location, we can't be sure we've sent the correct resource. There could be one nearer. So I'm just going to push on to the key point because I'm being threatened. So a successful AML implementation requires CAD functionality capable of taking AML coordinates and automatically deducing a human-readable address that's familiar to control room staff and responders. So be that the nearest property, road junction, or maps feature. Having CAD automatically address the coordinates will help emergency call handlers to efficiently use AML in ways that they are used to working. So this is the key point. We've taken the traditional process of location searching and completely reversed it by starting with the coordinates provided by AML and working backwards to deduce a human-readable address. We can make use of hyper-accurate AML coordinates without disrupting the existing workflows of the control room staff. And I just want to very quickly look at where we want to go from here. So that's supposed to be a mobile phone that has sent an AML string over to the ambulance service, who've interpreted the string, deduced the address, and sent an ambulance out to the patient. So all good. But what happens when we want to share that address? What happens if we need the police or the fire service? And this is the tricky bit, really. So what currently happens is control room staff will pick up the phone and ring the police or the fire control room, who will then relay the address, the operators of the police or fire, and will more than likely type that address into their gazetteer and hopefully produce some sort of coordinates that might be near the ones that we've responded to. But there's nothing to say it'll be the same. The accuracy is lost, if you like. The AML information can't be shared between emergency services. So by changing that language and using a service such as what 3 words, there are other ones available, but we can encode that AML information, use it to go over to another service or another agency who can decode it and send their resources to exactly the same point, which is massive for multi-agency response. Okay, so very quickly, in summary, what we've done is taken a look at how the AML can be implemented into emergency or public safety control rooms, essentially by enhancing CAD functionality to allow the call handler everything that they need to identify a location. You can reduce your training needs and the time taken for a successful implementation. This hinges on reversing the traditional process of location searching to identify coordinates. AML provides the coordinates by making CAD return a user-friendly and innovative address base based on the AML data. You've got all the pieces of the puzzle you need to get assistance accurately where it's needed. Thank you very much.